So in this video, I'm going to be talking about a question that I've been getting really often, which is, why is it so hard to regulate emotions and regulate feelings? Now, it's a bit trickier than we think it is, because we're focused on the wrong part of the problem. And in several videos, I talked about something called the TFAR system. So the TFAR system, thoughts equals feelings, equals actions, equals results. But that's not where it starts. Where do thoughts come from initially? There has to be a subconscious process from which we acquired those thoughts to begin with. And it all starts with data. We acquire data. It can be any kind of sensory data, any kind of input, informational data that we acquired. And then what we do with that data is that we analyze it to get a justification that makes sense on a conscious or logical level. Once we start justifying the data, we move into a result. We form some thoughts around this data through the justification that we made, so that then we can form a belief. Okay. So before we get to the TFAR system, we need to understand, where are these thoughts coming from? So people are trying to deal with feelings, right? We're trying to regulate feelings, trying to regulate emotions and how we feel. But this is not where the problem is. If we're feeling a certain way and we're trying to fight the way we're feeling, it's not really going to do us any good, because we're getting trapped in a vicious cycle. You feel bad, you start trying to find a justification for why you feel this way, and when you can't really find a justification for why you feel a certain way, you feel even worse, and you start pinpointing several problems in your life to basically justify the way you feel. But there's something underlying. There's an underlying process that took place that led to those feelings and those emotions. And it started with certain thoughts. Okay? Now, before thoughts, you have a belief. You wouldn't think a certain thought if you did not believe it to be true or wrong, right? And obviously, for thoughts to turn into feelings, action, and results, you need to believe that the thought is in fact true. And it all starts with data. Data can be a past experience. It can be an advice that somebody gave you. It can be something you went through on a personal level. It can be something you watched on TV. It can be an experience that your friend went through. And then you got into justification. Why did this happen? So let's say when you were a kid, your parents went bankrupt, okay? This is the data you received. What happened? They went bankrupt, you guys became poor, yada, yada, yada. The justification, you want to try to find a reason as to why this happened. Some people will start to blame themselves. If only I was better and helped them out, that maybe we could have prevented this problem from happening. So you give a justification for the data. Obviously, when we're looking at our own world, we're centered around what's happening in our world and how did we cause certain things to happen. We start going from a justification to a result. So you say to yourself, if I was more reliable, I could have prevented this problem from happening with my parents or whatever. So what happens is that the result is that you start thinking that you are an unreliable person, and you start forming a belief. Once a belief is formed, and especially when it's hardwired into your subconscious brain, it's hard to change, because with it comes certain thoughts. So now every time there are thoughts related to family problems, bankruptcy, money, financial literacy, yada, 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 you will always deep down feel that you are unreliable to tackle these problems, for the simple fact that you acquire certain data at a certain age. The justification and the result combined led you to a certain belief that became hardwired in your brain, and now you have some thought patterns. So, going back to the initial question of why is it so hard to regulate feelings, is because there is an underlying process. Just like in Freud's theory on the ID, the ego, and the superego, you find that there is a little tip of the iceberg. This is what we consciously perceive, but there's so much beneath it, which is how we got to build up this certain personality traits to begin with. And it's the same thing when it comes to the TFAR system and the data justification result belief pattern that we went through. So what happens is that we're trying to deal with the feelings, but the problem is never with the feelings themselves, it's with the thoughts that precede it. And when we talk about thoughts, they can be triggered by two different elements. It can be either a psychological element, it can be something that happened, and then through our sensory input, we try to justify it in a way that brought up certain thought patterns, or it can also be physiological. So anxiety and stress are a big one because there are a lot of physiological triggers that can stimulate a stressful reaction, and that would stimulate an anxiety. Coffee, for example, caffeine. A lot of people have a tendency when they drink caffeine to automatically develop the stress mechanism. Cortisol will start rushing in their system and they will start building up the anxiety bit by bit without even feeling it. So let's say you had your morning cup of coffee and then something very minor happens. Now your body is already in a state of agitation. You're already feeling agitated there. So what happens is that now you need to justify, why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling so agitated? So you start pinpointing different things in your life that you can basically look at and see and say, maybe that's why I'm feeling this way. Maybe that's why I'm feeling that way. And what happens is that this is automatic because you're feeling a certain way physiologically. You need a psychological justification as to why your body feels this way. And that's where the loop happens. Okay. Now, when we're trying to deal with feelings, again, we're not dealing with the real source of the problem because the feelings were triggered by certain thoughts. The example of somebody being unreliable. Let's say you made a very poor financial decision, okay? Automatically, the thoughts that get triggered with it is, I'm unreliable. I can't really make good financial decisions. It's been this way ever since I was a kid. It's those thoughts that led to the feelings. And then you start stressing out about your finances, for example. And then with that stress, you start developing a little bit of anxiety. Now, it doesn't end there. When we feel a certain way, what happens is that we either take certain actions or we don't. So we feel stressed and we feel anxious. What kind of actions are we going to take when we're feeling that way? We're going to take actions or we're going to not take actions in connection with the way we feel. And this will lead us to results. Once we get to results, we go back to data. The results are going to be data that are going to be inputted into our subconscious system. And through that, also sensory inputs. We'll go through the cycle again, data, justification, result, belief. Then when the cycle is happening, the belief is being reinforced again and again, and the thought patterns are also being reinforced. So this is why it's a vicious cycle. It's because we focus on the feelings. We focus on feeling stressed or anxious, and we don't see the bigger image, right? There are thoughts, there's a belief system, there are results that we went through, certain justification, logical interpretations that we went through to get to that point. So the big question is, how can we deal with that? You cannot deal with the way you feel by fixating your focus on feelings and emotions. This will only make it worse. You can focus on three different things. You can either focus on your thoughts. You can figure out what are some thoughts that are triggering these feelings and these emotions, and how can I get rid of these thoughts, right? There's a course I made at one point on procrastination, and a lot of people, they were saying that they weren't able to really get over procrastination. So there is something called a bracelet technique. The bracelet technique, you basically put an elastic or rubber band on your wrist, and every time a certain thought of procrastination, an unwanted thought of procrastination pops up, you snap the bracelet on your wrist, which creates little physiological discomfort, and then you need to psychologically link this little sting that you felt to the thought of procrastination. When you do that over and over again, by nature, as human beings, we want to avoid pain and embrace pleasure. When certain thoughts related to procrastination starts being connected with the little sting you're feeling on your wrist, your subconscious brain, the reptile part of the brain that wants to seek pleasure and avoid pain, will automatically start deviating from these thoughts. And same thing goes for that. If there are certain thoughts that you identify that are triggering certain feelings, you need to find a creative way to deal with these thoughts. Now, oftentimes, you might not be able to deal with the thoughts. Something happened in your external world, thoughts came up, feelings are there, and now you're just trying to fight the emotions and trying to fight the feelings. You don't know what to do about it. Now, feelings will lead to action. Okay, there is Tony Robbins says, emotions are energy in motion. Energy in motion. So that's where actions come into play. If you're feeling a certain way and you act accordingly, you will just be reinforcing the way you feel. If you're feeling stressed or anxious and you allow that to hinder your day or hinder your performance, you will be reinforcing the result, the data, justification result, and then reinforcing the belief again. What you need to do, and we have the willpower capacity to do that, act not according to how you feel, but according to what you need to do or what you think is right or what will lead you to what you actually want to achieve. Once you act differently, your entire system is confused because you're used to acting a certain way when you feel stressed or anxious, for example, and now you're acting in a completely different way. So when you start changing the physiology and the psychology of how you react to certain emotions, the emotions themselves lose the power they have over you, and you gain that power back. When you change the action, when you use your willpower to control the actions, the results will change. Once the results change, the data will change, the justification will change, and with enough repetition, your entire belief system will change. Then the thought patterns will not be there anymore. And another way to deal with it, if you don't want to feel that you don't have enough willpower to deal with the action itself, try to deal with the thoughts. There are those two elements surrounding feelings, which is thoughts and actions. You need to step in when it comes to either your thoughts or your action. And if you do that effectively, you will start deviating yourself from the standard that you set yourself to feel a certain way, and you'll start reacting differently. You will stop becoming reactive and you'll start becoming proactive towards how you feel. And that's the end goal. So, to summarize it, stop focusing on the feeling itself because it's only going to make it worse. Focus on either the thoughts that triggered it or focus on the action that you are taking every time those emotions or feelings are being triggered. And if you can change the thoughts or you can change the actions, the results will change, the data will change, the justification will change, then the results again will change, and your belief system, it will take time, but your belief system will start to change bit by bit. Before you know it, your subconscious brain is rewired to shift away from a certain mental state, from certain feelings and emotions, and you'll start embracing a more empowering state, more empowering emotions and more empowering feelings. And that's the end goal we're all trying to achieve there. Okay?